Peaks of present and sheets of past. Fourth commentary on Bergson. The crystal reveals a direct time image, and no longer an indirect image of time deriving from movement. It does not abstract time. It does better. It reverses its subordination in relation to movement. What the crystal reveals or makes visible is the hidden ground of time, that is, its differentiation into two flows, that of presents which pass and that of pasts which are preserved. Time simultaneously makes the present past and preserves the past in itself. There are therefore already two possible time images, one grounded in the past and the other in the present. Each is complex and is valid for time as a whole. We have seen that Bergson gave an assured status to the first image. This is the model of the inverse cone. The past is not to be confused with the mental existence of recollection images, which actualize it in us. It is preserved in time. It is the virtual element into which we penetrate to look for the pure recollection, which will become actual in a recollection image. The latter would have no trace of the past if we had not been to look for its seed in the past. It is the same as with perception. Just as we perceive things where they are present in space, we remember where they have passed in time, and we go out of ourselves just as much in each case. Memory is not in us. It is we who move in a being memory, a world memory. In short, the past appears as the most general form of an already there, a pre-existence in general, which our recollections presuppose. Even our first recollection, if there was one, which our perceptions, even the first, make use of. From this point of view, the present itself exists only as an infinitely contracted past, which is constituted at the extreme point of the already there. The present would not pass on without this condition. It would not pass on if it was not the most contracted degree of the past. In fact, it is striking that the successive is not the past, but the present which is passing. The past appears in contrast as the coexistence of circles, which are more or less dilated or contracted, each one which contains everything at the same time, and the present of which is the extreme limit, the smallest circuit that contains all the past. Between the past as pre-existence in general and the present as infinitely contracted past, there are therefore all the circles of the past constituting so many stretched or shrunk regions, strata, and sheets, each region with its own characteristics, its tones, its aspects, its singularities, its shining points, and its dominant themes. Depending on the nature of the recollection that we are looking for, we have to jump into a particular circle. It is true that these regions, my childhood, my adolescence, my adult life, etc., appear to succeed each other, but they succeed each other only from the point of view of former presents, which marked the limit of each of them. They coexist, in contrast, from the point of view of the actual present, which each time represents their common limit, are the most contracted of them. What Fellini says is Bergsonian. We are constructed in memory. We are simultaneously childhood, adolescence, old age, and maturity. What happens when we search for a recollection? We have to put ourselves into the past in general. Then we have to choose between the regions. In which one do we think that the recollection is hidden, huddled up waiting for us and evading us? We have to jump into a chosen region, even if we have to return to the present in order to make another jump. If the recollection sought for gives no response and does not realize itself in a recollection image. These are the paradoxical characteristics of a non-chronological time, the pre-existence of a past in general, the coexistence of all the sheets of past, and the existence of a most contracted degree. And with Bergson, this time image extends naturally into a language image and a thought image. What the past is to time, sense is to language, and idea to thought. Sense as past of language is the form of its pre-existence, that which we place ourselves in, at once in order to understand images of sentences, to distinguish the images of words and even phonemes that we hear. It is therefore organized in coexisting circles, sheets or regions between which we choose according to actual auditory signs which are grasped in a confused way. Similarly, we place ourselves initially in the idea. We jump into one of its circles in order to form images which correspond to the actual quest. Thus, chronosigns are continually extended into lectosigns and nuosigns. But to approach it in a different way, can the present in turn stand for the whole of time? Yes, perhaps, if we manage to separate it from its own actual quality, in the same way that we distinguish the past from the recollection image, which actualized it. If the present is actually distinguishable from the future and the past, it is because it is presence of something, which precisely stops being present when it is replaced by something else. It is in relation to the present of something else that the past and future are said of a thing. We are then passing along different events in accordance with an explicit time or a form of succession, which entails that a variety of things fill the present one after another. It is quite different if we are established inside one single event. If we plunge into an event that is in preparation, arrives, and is over. If for a longitudinal, pragmatic view we substitute a vision, which is purely optical, vertical, or rather one, in depth, the event is no longer confused with the space which serves as its place, nor with the actual present which is passing. The time of the event comes to an end before the event does, so the event will start again at another time. The whole event is, as it were, in the time where nothing happens. And it is in empty time that we anticipate recollection, break up what is actual, and locate the recollection once it is formed. On this occasion, there is no longer a future, present, and past in succession, in accordance with the explicit passage of presence, which we make out. Adopting St. Augustine's fine formulation, there is a present of the future, a present of the present, and a present of the past, all implicated in the event, rolled up in the event, and thus simultaneous and inexplicable. From affect to time, a time is revealed inside the event, which is made from the simultaneity of these three implicated presents, from these deactualized peaks of present. It is the possibility of treating the world or life, or simply a life, or an episode as one single event which provides the basis where the implication of presence, an accident, is about to happen. It happens. It has happened. But equally, it is at the same time that it will take place, has already taken place, and is in the process of taking place, so that before taking place, it has not taken place, and taking place will not take place, etc. We find ourselves here in a direct time image of a different kind from the previous one, no longer the coexistence of sheets of past, but the simultaneity of peaks of present. We therefore have two kinds of chronosigns. The first are aspects, regions, layers. The second, accents, peaks of view, points of vue. The essential point rather appears if we think of an earthly event which is assumed to be transmitted to different planets, one of which would receive it at the same time at the speed of light, but the second more quickly, and the third less quickly. Hence, before it happened, and after. The latter would not yet have received it, the second would have already received it. The first would be receiving it in three simultaneous presents bound into the same universe. This would be a sidereal time, a system of relativity, where the characters would be not so much human as planetary, and the accents not so much subjective as astronomical, in a plurality of worlds constituting the universe. It would be a pluralist cosmology, where there are not only different worlds, as in Manelli, but where one and the same event is played out in these different worlds, in incompatible versions. These are not subjective, imaginary points of view in one and the same world, but one and the same event in different objective worlds, all implicated in the event. Inexplicable universe. We have seen that in the image a distinction is always made between the real and the imaginary, the objective and the subjective, the physical and the mental, and the actual and the virtual, but that this distinction becomes reversible, and in that sense indiscernible. Distinct and yet indiscernible, these are the characteristics of the imaginary and the real in each of the two authors. This is no longer only the indiscernible becoming of distinct images, it is the undecidable alternatives between circles of past, inextricable differences between peaks of present, the coexistence of sheets of virtual past, and the simultaneity of peaks of de-actualized present are the two direct signs of time itself, which shows that unity does not lie in the recollection image, is that the latter bursts out in two directions. The first kind of image reconstitutes motor series of former presents, events, actualité, or habits. These are the cross-cutting shot-reaction shots. This time, the image moves to a true exploration of a sheet of past. The images in depth express regions of past as such, each with its own accents or potentials, and mark critical moments. The hero acts, walks, and moves, but it is the past that he plunges himself into and moves in. Time is no longer subordinated to movement, but movement to time. In short, in the second case, the recollection image does not pass on in a succession of former presents, which it reconstitutes but goes beyond itself in regions of coexisting past which make it possible. This is the function of depth of field, to explore each time a region of past, a continuum. The term Baroque or Neo-Expressionism is literally appropriate in this freeing of depth which now subordinates all other dimensions. We should see not only the conquest of a continuum, but the temporal nature of this continuum. It is a continuity of duration, which means that the unbridled depth is of time and no longer of space. It is irreducible to the dimensions of space, as long as depth remained caught in the simple succession of parallel planes. it already represented time, but in an indirect way which kept it subordinate to space and movement. The new depth, in contrast, directly forms a region of time, a region of past, which is defined by optical aspects or elements borrowed from interacting planes. It is a set of non-localizable connections, always from one plane to another, which constitutes the region of past, or the continuum of duration. We must note the fact before trying to explain it. Most of the occasions where depth of field appear wholly necessary are in connection with memory, and here again cinema is Bergsonian. It is not a case of psychological memory made up of recollection images as the flashback can conventionally represent it. It is not a case of a succession of presents passing according to chronological time. It is a case either of an attempt to evoke produced in an actual present and preceding the formation of recollection images, or of the exploration of a sheet of past, from which these recollection images will later arise. It is an on this side of and a beyond of psychological memory. The two poles of the metaphysics of memory. These two extremes of memory are presented by Bergson as follows: the extension of sheets of past and the contraction of the actual present. And the two are connected, since to evoke recollection is to jump into a region of past where one assumes that it is lying in a virtual state. All the sheets are regions coexisting in relation to the contracted actual present from which the evocation proceeds, whilst they follow each other psychologically in relation to the presents that they were. What must be noted is the depth the field sometimes shows as evocation in the act of occurring, and sometimes virtual sheets of past that we explore in order to find the recollection sought. We must go back to the Bergsonian distinction between the pure recollection, which is always virtual, and the recollection image, which makes it actual, only in relation to a present. In a crucial passage, Bergson says that pure recollection should definitely not be confused with the recollection image which derives from it. It remains a magnetizer behind the hallucinations which it prompts. On each occasion, pure recollection is in a sheet or continuum, which is preserved in time. Each sheet of past has its distribution, its fragmentation, its shining points, its nebulae, in short, an age. When I take up position on such a sheet, two things can happen. Either I discover there the point I was looking for, which will thus be actualized in a recollection image, but it is clear that the latter does not possess in itself the mark of the past, which it only inherits. Or I do not discover the point because it is on a different sheet which is inaccessible to me, belonging to a different age. But a third case can arise. We constitute a continuum, which fragments of different ages. We make use of transformations which take place between two sheets to constitute a sheet of transformation. For instance, in a dream, there is no longer one recollection image, which embodies one particular point of a given sheet. There are a number of images which are embodied within each other, each referring to a different point of the sheet. Perhaps when we read a book, watch a show, or look at a painting, and especially when we are ourselves the author, an analogous process can be triggered. We constitute a sheet of transformation, which invents a kind of transverse continuity, or communication between several sheets, and weaves a network of non-localizable relations between them. In this way, we extract non-chronological time. We draw out a sheet which, across all the rest, catches and extends the trajectory of points, the evolution of regions. This is evidently a task which runs the risk of failure. Sometimes we only produce an incoherent dust made of juxtaposed borrowings. Sometimes we only form generalities which retain mere resemblances. All this is the territory of false recollections, with which we trick ourselves or try to trick others. But it is possible for the work of art to succeed in inventing these paradoxical, hypnotic, and hallucinatory sheets, whose property is to be at once of past and always to come. It is a third possibility which was suggested for Marion Bend. No other is less bound up in the past. It is a cinema which, in an endeavor to sketch the present, prevents the past from being debased into recollection. Each sheet of past, each age, calls up all the mental functions simultaneously. Recollection, but equally forgetting, false recollection, imagination, planning, judgment. But when transformations themselves form a sheet which crosses all the others, it is as if feelings set free the consciousness or thought with which they are loaded, a becoming conscious, according to which shadows are the living realities of a mental theater and feelings the true figures. In a cerebral game, which is very concrete, it is hypnosis which reveals thought to itself. In a single movement, Resnius goes beyond characters towards feelings and beyond feelings towards the thought of which they are the characters. This is why Resnius is always saying that he is interested only in what happens in the brain, in cerebral mechanisms, monstrous, chaotic, or creative mechanisms. If feelings are the ages of the world, thought is the non-chronological time which corresponds to them. If feelings are sheets of past, thought, the brain, is the set of non-localizable relations between all these sheets. The continuity which rolls them up and unrolls them like so many lobes, preventing them from halting and becoming fixed in a death position. In cinema, Resnius says something ought to happen around the image, behind the image, and even inside the image. This is what happens when the image becomes time image. The world has become memory, brain, superimposition of ages or lobes. But the brain itself has become consciousness, continuation of ages, creation or growth of ever new lobes, recreation of matter as with styrene. The screen itself is the cerebral membrane where immediate and direct confrontations take place between the past and the future, the inside and the outside, at a distance impossible to determine, independent of any fixed point. The image no longer has space and movement as its primary characteristics, but topology and time.